This match, I feel, deserves a little bit of a background story. So previous to this match here, another match on Supreme Straits was played between both of these teams, basically the same teams. One or two players might have been swapped out, but essentially the same teams. What happened was one of those teams went for the vehicle cheese that we have seen oh so many times and completely swept through the other team. This is the match directly following that, and as you might guess, yours truly was playing in it. It was an excellent match, and I'm super excited to show it to you. It was largely requested. I think 3 different people all asked that this match be covered because it turned into easily one of the most chaotic, the most entertaining, and the most engaging matches that I've played in a long time. Now, I'm not going to be the leader today. That honor goes to Genjuro, our bright blue player in the northeastern segment, representing the Armada faction and the blue team alike, going for that bot lab in this position. Our plan was to amass vehicles and do a very, very early push. We wanted to do a 5-minute tank push, and not so much a big swarm, but more so just apply a thick amount of pressure onto the front line as quickly as possible. The red team, well, I'm not sure. It looks like they're sort of on to the antics here. They are calling for a scout. They're hoping to eat up the free metal. They're definitely well aware of the idea of going for a little bit of a cheeky maneuver. I was going for something very special in the back line here. Oh, sorry, I should introduce our red team leader, spawning in the southwestern corner, also an Armada, but dressed up in that beautiful red color. It's Sus Cheese, going for the bot lab in the geothermal position here. Interesting, because it does make it look quite normal. An air lab here for Pondor Grief, that is quite odd. Bit of an interesting tactic there. And you can see, I've definitely got some plans. I requested a transport from Babies, who is our backline techer, our elected techer, going for air and tech, although I think more air than tech. I can't remember exactly, but definitely already getting a scout plane out to check around the map. A little bit early on this scout. Usually you need to scout about 4 minutes, 5 minutes in order for the push to be scouted or the production to be scouted. But certainly scouting earlier is going to allow you to the very least see if maybe there's a incredibly early, incredibly aggressive cheese planned in the background. Right now, didn't see anything too important. Basically, everything looks stock standard, which actually could come back to bite us in the ass because, yeah, that could give a false sense of confidence, right? Oh, they're playing standard. We can just play standard, go greedy, all that good stuff. 2 interesting things happening simultaneously. I am transporting an artillery vehicle onto the high ground here, and also there's a constructor plane already headed out towards Baby's base. Ironically enough, I did call for radar early on into this game, but it looks like both of these players neglected my advice. And yeah, it looks like a single constructor plane will fly in through the back here, going unnoticed. As it were, the artillery truck does make land over here, and immediately I start shelling away at these metal extractors. Very, very annoying. Will Baby see it over here? I'm curious. Yeah, the plane is spotted. Absolutely spent a, well, a fair amount of time, I would say. Sorry, I had something in my throat there. And the plane will do that classic cheese in the back high ground here, setting up a build tower and then a bot lab and going for that sort of early, that sort of very cheesy aggression here. We definitely could have scouted this because this air lab was here, but failing to do so meant that that lab will go up uncontested. Meanwhile, this Wolverine has got tremendous value out, getting down all 3 metal extractors here for the brown player on the front, Swiss Whiskey, as well as some of the metal extractors here for the pink player, AMA 2017. You can see just how annoying this thing is. With it being this high up, it has a huge field of fire. And now AMA is dealing with the repercussions of that devastating fire effect. I also was able to slip a missile truck in here for anti-air coverage, which turned out to be a great move because shurikens are one of the ways in which this can be held here. A fighter will kill my transports, no more of that. But at least for the time being, the missile truck will also be able to contribute a little bit of firepower. A little bit of a pause there. I was bragging about my little boy, my little boys, I should say. Having a grand old time terrorizing the metal extractors back here, wasting tons of metal for these people on the front lines. And now you can see the aggression is starting to pool forward. Flat E, who is in the, oh, where is Flat E? Oh, all the way back here. Our C-Line player has built a ton of blitzes and has sent them through on the front lines. There's also a massive tanks building here from Lamberto, our light blue player. And the artillery is continuing to shell down. constantly denying economy. You can see that all these frontline players are down to just scraps of metal, barely any metal remaining because of how effective this thing is at killing those metal extractors. When I'm aiming it properly, that is. The field of fire is tremendous. I would absolutely recommend this. Very difficult to shut this down. Getting one of these up here is very, very easy to do, and shutting it down is very difficult. Now the blitzes are pushing forward, that early aggression coming into play. Trying to use a missile truck to shoot down any air defenses that do come out here. You can see just how dangerous this Armada build is. Now you can see in the backline here for Pondo Grief, there's tons of metal but no energy remaining. Trying to get a jammer field up here so that this doesn't get accidentally scouted. I feel like we probably, no vision was gained over here. Also a nice little scout from Whippy. I didn't notice that, but a scout plane did come through. And now the aggression has a lane to push through on. This is pretty dangerous. There are some idle tanks here. Would have loved to see those moving forward with the infantry division. Pondo Grief trying to move the commander around into a de-gunnable position here, but not going to get it. The air lab will go down to fighters and the blitzes, taking down everything here for Pondo Grief's base. The front line is now ravaged. And I'll be honest, I was getting pretty cocky here. I thought we had this one in the bag. I'll tell you right now, this replay goes on for another 50 minutes. So we're, well, 46 minutes? Yeah, 46 minutes. So we're still in for quite a treat here. Certainly enough game to keep you satisfied, at least I hope. And you can see these tanks continuing to roll forward, tons of pressure being applied. Maces were pumped out rather rapidly from Sus Cheese, which was really, really nicely done. Easily could have just ecoed and tried to go for full greed, and would have been overrun immediately by all of these forces, but made the right decision to go all the way into units so that he had a fighting chance of cleaning this up eventually. Shuriken also very critical here, shutting down a lot of these tanks and minimizing the amount of damage that they can do in the backline. Build turrets eating up all that delicious metal as well. And now you can see the metal investment is quite severe. Yeah, lots and lots of metal is coming out here. And it's all being dumped on the enemy's front lines, so it needs to either be reclaimed or it needs to somehow get funneled in one direction or the other. Do we have res bots out? I don't see any res bots at the moment. There are construction turrets though, so I wouldn't be surprised if those are eating up wreckages here and there. Whenever possible. Missile truck doing a great job of warding off some of these fighters, as well as the Shuriken whenever they get a little too comfortable up on the top of the map here. Commander goes down, takes out a huge part of our army, slows down the push really, really heavily. It's very dangerous. That contributes a lot towards the push's success, as those commanders being a menace to any armored infantry or armored vehicles on the front lines. Now, against our knowledge, or without our knowledge, there were maces and pawns pooling in the back line here. We had thought that Pondo Grief had abandoned the game, had given up all hope, but it was not so. Commander was still kicking in the back line here and walking away. Meanwhile, a ton of damage was going down. Looks like some windmills were handed over by Kalza to Pondo Grief, which is really nice. Love to see that teamwork here. Blitz is getting on top of a bunch of maces. That's a great trade. Definitely going to trade out really nicely against all those. Little D-gun there, takes out some of the blitzes, but definitely a lot to do some big damage here from Kinjuro, which is always lovely to see. The missile truck and the artillery still doing their job. 2-star artillery up on this hill. I would definitely recommend it. This happened to me, and it has since become one of my very, very favorite strategies to go for here on Supreme Straits. It's superbly annoying, and there's not a great way to deal with it, especially once that missile truck comes up. That's a little bit of anti-air, but it's all you need to deny something like gunships or shuriken or anything like that. You see the call for shurikens was made, but the missile truck is there providing that the beautiful anti-air defense. Another option you have is to take a commander and build a laser turret up there. The commander has no vertical build limit, so you can build up as high as you want. And that's a great option for dealing with this. Pondo Grief is going full on into the cheese, completely committing to it, getting up a second lab as well as some more construction turrets, fully pumping out units, 100% committed to this, which is understandable, right? I mean, the main base has been lost here, using the commander to build more windmills. That's the only thing that we're lacking is energy for this push, but this is looking dangerous. 5 maces, 10 pawns, and more on the way. and we were completely oblivious to it. You can see I was pumping out missile trucks. This is what I wanted to get down on the front line, but pumping them out so far back, it meant that it was really difficult to get them out there. And so, despite having tons of missile trucks on the field at this point, 15, well, minus the one up here, so we'll call it 14, I couldn't get them anywhere. I couldn't do anything with them, which was just really difficult to manage. It was unfortunate. These would have been able to harass down a lot of these units from ultra long range. Would have shut down a lot of these rocket bots, or Centurions rather. I don't know why I said rocket bots. I was thinking of rocket bots, but I saw Centurions, and here they are. Here's my artillery continuing to rain down here. Gold Star artillery. Do we have any sort of response to that? I don't know. We're going to need T2 ships. I'm thinking T2 land or T2 airships. I guess I suppose I mean. In order to deal with that artillery, just because the missile truck is up there. Bar from the missile truck being there, no name drop intended. It's super easy to shut that down. Just a single shuriken to go paralyze it. But with that missile truck, it becomes vastly more complicated of a problem to solve. Orange fighters doing good work, shutting down the fighters coming out from purple. Of course, trying to shut down the shuriken. It's all a big mess of you fight me and I fight you. Oh, interesting. Eventually a lab was handed over to Kalza. Very interesting. Okay, so Kalza is fighting on two fronts here, producing units in the backline as well as producing units in our backline. Bomber comes across here to do a little bit of damage, and I do like that. Yeah, might as well. Take down some of the windmills of Kalza. It's going to shut down the production quite a bit. This anti-air turret is going to take a while. Fighters are out, and they will shoot down at least one of these bombers. Second one is coming in for a run, though. Ooh, gets shot down a little bit early, a little bit before it's running, so it will not manage to pull it off. At this point, the order is given up north to move the units in and attack, and so you can see anti-air bots here to shut down whatever the air lab can pump out. You can see the bots swarming into the bases, and I hadn't even realized I was focused over here. Wasn't even looking at my main base, which was being completely ravaged at the moment. Yeah, you can see my cursor's back here now. Things are happening, and I'm not even aware of it. Heating up those pawns, but the build towers go down. The commander luckily wasn't sacrificed for the metal, so I will be able to use it to threaten away a couple of these maces here. Try and push them away. That T2 lab serving as a buffer. It's very expensive, but it's also very tanky. So now that it's in the way, I can use it to sort of get myself into position here. Trying to degun as many of these maces as possible, but it is quite annoying. Maces are basically the same speed as command. Well, let me double check that actually. Speed of 46 versus the commander's speed of 38. So the maces are actually a little bit faster. Does mean that they have a great time running around in the back lines. Trying to get a T2 tank out to deal with this, but this is a really tough position. This is a great play going for bots. I mean, well, it's the only way that you can do it, but going for bots really hard counters the vehicles that I was going for back here, because the vehicles can't really get up this slope and punish in the back lane here, so those ended up being really critical. You can see these units continuing to swarm down the hill, by the way, and punish everyone's back line. And suddenly, this push that looked like it was going to win us the game has suddenly flipped against us, as now there is tons and tons of units streaming out from all that metal that was produced. T2 gunslingers are on the front lines now, basically going to easily shut down all of those T1 medium tanks. They're pretty good against them. Just a couple shots in order to take them down, but obviously that impulse is also incredibly annoying to deal with. Commander going down is a really quick way to take down a whole lot of those tanks. Shurikens also doing their best to paralyze everything up here. Artillery still doing its job. Now a double gold star artillery. Continuing to rain down shells from above. Nice little amphibious tank push on this side from Lamberto. No, sorry, from Murma. Meanwhile, units are continuing to stream out here, and we don't have any bots. Eventually, Flat E will produce a whole bunch of bots and send them up that way, trying to deal with this issue. But yeah, they've completely swarmed babies. You can see Genjuro looks back and realizes that the backline has been completely ravaged. I tried to move my commander up here, and it very quickly went down. Yeah, it did not last very long. Trying to get some sort of defense up, get some metal extractors up, anything I can to hold on at the moment. T2 tank is out, and that's pretty good against the maces. It's alright, it's not great. The tiger is not nearly as good as the bull. Quite a bit less expensive though, 665. Probably couldn't have produced a bull in that time. Well, maybe I could have. The math says I could have, but I'm not sure if I had the build power. Twin guard comes up, very good, especially against these early T1 units. But yeah, these maces are shutting down all my critical power infrastructure. I'm running out of energy rapidly. The tiger is very tanky though. It does have a lot of health, which makes it an ideal unit for soaking up a lot of these hits from the maces, allowing blitzes and other units to get in there and cause some damage. You can see it just absorbing hits like it's nothing, shrugging them off. And eventually the maces do go down with support, fire support from the blitzes. Tons of metal lying around on the floor there, which is one of the only ways that you can hope to get back into this game. Ticks are now streaming out, interestingly enough. Eventually that lab was just handed back over to Pond or Grief. Meanwhile, the front lines have stabilized now for the red team, who has dealt with all the units and are now building an army of their own. Eating up a whole bunch of this metal on the front would be nice. There's tons and tons of it. They weren't kidding about metal donations, and now that's 5.5 thousand metal lying right within arm's reach of Sus Cheese, who is going to move the commander forward and continue pushing. Only one player tapped out of the game from all of that damage. Our entire back line was completely destroyed, their entire front line was destroyed, so it's really just a matter of which is more important. And it's going to be difficult to recuperate in the back line. Baby's trying to walk up into this area as well. Very nicely done with the res bots. Ponder Grief making sure to use those res bots to eat up the metal that I so generously donated with that commander into the back line. Very good to see that. You can see full-on unit production. We are no longer split between labs. It is just 100% unit production up here on the mountain. It's going to take a significant investment in order to clean all this up. We need some bots in the back line, and that was really the biggest problem here, is there was no bots for, well, for anybody. Eventually I brought these missile trucks back, and I was glad I did. Called the missile trucks back and needed them in order to deal with a lot of this T1. They're pretty good against pawns. They're decent against maces. Obviously a whole lot better when they're in numbers and they can start volleying down these units in one big bout of fire. Ponder Grief's commander goes down in basically the same location mine did. Not very effective, that, no. Mace is a little bit unfocused, and so distributing their firepower between all the different rocket trucks, meaning that a lot of them are going to stay alive. And the more rocket trucks are alive, the more damage they can do, which is a fairly obvious statement, but it is very, very critical. Now the maces are largely dealt with, and this area feels like it's basically contained. Pawns are starting to leak into the backline here, and it is only by the good graces of the ticks and the pawns and the maces that they stay alive. Babies tries to take some of the blame. I mean, there was no radar when that was brought up, but certainly, you know, none of us were expecting a cheese after we had just cheesed the entire front line. I certainly wasn't expecting it. I doubt anyone else was as well. By Genjuro's reaction, his WTF reaction when he looked back here and saw everybody destroyed, yeah, he probably wasn't expecting it either. So blame probably dispersed basically evenly, but this is still a huge problem in the backline. Was Babies rebuilding anywhere? I didn't see. Still in the game, but does not have any sort of constructor, it would appear. So no longer rebuilding. Pawns are continuing to be thrown away up here, but not really going to be able to achieve enough. I'm going to set my missile trucks up here, and eventually I think I get into bots, which is really where I want to be. Yeah, that's it. The way to stop the backline live shot is patrol a single fighter over that hill. Not incorrect. It is a very easy way to stop that. Bunch of amphibious tanks, now the T2 tanks rolling up the hill, as well as a couple of T1s, but mostly the T2 tanks are the powerhouse here. They wipe out the yellow player that's going to be Kalze, who is now down just to a commander. Cloaked up on this hill with barely enough energy to sustain it, but cloaked nonetheless, which is quite nice. Very nicely done of Murmas to go into some sort of land-based attack force, making sure to hold on there. And it is powerful to get those land-based forces up onto the shore here. Bunch of bombers trying their very best. There is anti-air, and it's T2 anti-air as well, so they're going to shoot down these bombers pretty quickly, actually. The bombers are relatively tanky, but they're not nearly tanky enough to take on that T2 composition. And so yeah, tons and tons of damage will end up happening here. It's also nice that these anti-air are right under the air wall. It does weaken it up a little bit. Just over time, those fighters are going to start going down here. Really nicely done. Everyone asking if this player is dead. No sir, still kicking in the back lines here. Even setting up some static defense. At this point I was just worried about holding it while rebuilding economy. Trying to get out some res bots here. Very, very low on energy at the moment. Looks like those units did go down. I don't see what killed them. Probably was a combination of D-guns as well as this gunslinger here. Eventually shut down a lot of those units, and you can see this match is now turned on its head. Sushi's in a bit of trouble here. There is a starlight out. They can shoot pretty far away. Yeah, you don't want to move a commander within range of that bad boy. Commander actually getting jumped on by a whole bunch of pawns here. Pawns and blitzes getting a nice little jump on this commander. Commander death will take out a lot of them, though, leaving tons of metal in its wake. I see. A little bit of aggression here. Some hover tanks trying to float their way forward on the beachhead side. But luckily, Flat E has done a great job of porking up the defenses here, making sure to... oh, I even said it. Making sure to pork up the defenses so that nothing is going to be able to get through. Eventually, light laser turrets, beamer turrets, and a couple of pawns as well are going to be able to hold on against those hovercraft. Nicely done. That is a lot of hover tanks, though. Certainly could do some damage. I think if all those hover tanks had been committed, they would have been able to overwhelm the defenses. But with what little was sent there, it was basically just the right amount in order to hold on. Oh, interesting. So the labs have been eaten up here. It looks like Pondered Reef is looking to get out of this position. The labs have gone down, which means no more production is going to be seen over here. I don't think there's a constructor out either, so not going to... I said still very committed. Ironically, that's not true. There's just a lot of units here, but there's not actually a lab here. I guess building up one final wave and then sending them out. I would have liked to see some res bots produced before we give up those labs, just so that we can eat up all this metal, because otherwise it's going to be a lot of metal that's just going to end up laying around at the bottom here. Well, I guess if these construction turrets don't eat it up, which they are keen to do. Interesting. Very nicely done. Gunslingers here from Fat Panda do march forward and blow up that commander debris, reducing it down to half price. Yeah, very, very slim pickings from that commander debris as it was reduced down. Bunch of shuriken paralyzed everything up here. Eventually my artillery did go down, by the way. Just so everyone is aware. Ooh, a cruise missile ship was also brought in to harass our front line. Genjuro in quite a little trouble here, as there's not a great answer to this. There were starlights, right? Oh, there's also Mausers. So if we have a radar bot or something and we park it over here, eventually those Mauser are going to be able to fire on this ship. So there is actually an answer. It's just a bit of a complicated one. Lamberto rebuilding the metal extractors over here. That's nicely done. Babies was apparently given a constructor, which is also very good to see. Gonna start up that, start rebuilding in the back line here. Meanwhile, I was all Resurrection Central. Wanted to get as many of these bots resurrected and folded back into my unit composition as possible here. You can see that I've gone for a full-on tech switch, gone all the way into bots and right up into T2 bots, of all things. Trying to manage going into T2 bots while eating up the T2 vehicle bay. Very, very complicated, very difficult, and I was certainly struggling, yeah. Welders are now coming out from a T2 lab for Flat E, which is very, very powerful. And I think eventually that's going to be what we need. But T3 is already coming out for Sus Cheese. He's got that, well, he's got the geothermal. He didn't upgrade this to a advanced or a prude, so it's just a base geothermal, and also the fusion reactor is coming up and online. Yeah, basically has the metal in order to fund this too. I was going to say we're a little shy on metal, but I think over time that actually will come up without a stall, which is nice to see. Definitely going to get some tremendous value out with that. These Marauders are looking pretty dangerous, though. That's only 5 Marauder, but they could certainly punch through this T1 defense. I mean, light laser turrets and beamers. The beamers are pretty good, and if you build enough of them, as well as some of those T2 walls, they can hold up really well against a lot of those T2 units, but those are just T1 walls with light laser turrets, so I don't know if that's going to be nearly enough to handle a bunch of Marauders trying to run their way through. Big old bombing run coming out here as well up north from Murma, trying to sneak a couple bombers through, and I think that's a great idea. Keep hammering on the weak points. Always want to be pressuring wherever you think that there's the least amount of resistance in order to break through. Definitely not where there's the most resistance. Marauders also coming out from Fat Panda in the back line, which is nice to see. They are spotted and as well called out by Genjuro, who's going to send some of his lightning tanks over to investigate and hopefully hold the front lines. Well, the sidelines, I guess. They're kind of headed towards Murma right now. We can see their rally point is sort of out into the ocean, but eventually I think they're going to walk on shore and try and do a little bit of damage. Marauders over on the southern side are just waiting at the moment, and ooh, some ticks run by. Oh, are they going to get the gunslinger? Doesn't look like it. Oh, friendly fire from that gunslinger did take that one down. That's pretty funny. Shurikens rather, are here to paralyze a whole bunch of these. That's not exactly the ideal solution because you'd need basically as many shuriken as there are resbots, and they're both pretty, or as many shuriken as there are ticks rather, and they are pretty cheap, but not that cheap. Lightning tanks were in a great position here. Excellent catch by Genjuro rather. Pushing back these Marauders, forcing them out into the ocean where they can be dealt with later. Meanwhile, the Marauder run by over here. It's going to be, well, pushed a little bit in by some maces, but they're not going to be able to keep up here. Might be able to fire at these Marauders for a little bit, but certainly not enough sustained damage to do anything serious here. Luckily, I spotted it as well, and I was moving all my units into position to try and deal with this. Flat E was actually in a way better position, though, with the commander, and actually was able to start moving it forward to try and hit some of these Marauders wherever it could. Oh, missed with the D-gun, though. And these Marauders sweep into the backline, avoiding that commander and deciding to, instead of going for the backline, which has basically already been ravaged. Ooh, that was a big clump of tumbleweed right there. Going into the base here of Genjuro, taking down the metal extractor, or the energy converters rather, well as the metal extractors, I should say. Targeting down whatever they can. Fusion reactors, sure, yeah, get it all. T2 having a lot of trouble, luckily being repaired at the moment. And it looks like, oh, it's close. It will eventually stay alive. Nicely done. That could have been a whole lot worse. Just losing a metal extractor and some energy converters, definitely not the end of the world. Could have been a much worse position here. Eventually, this northern section is completely cleaned up. Took a long time to do, but eventually it will be all cleaned up, and we can focus on getting back into the front line. At this point, I'm going for T2, trying to tech as hard as humanly possible just to find some way out of this here. Another little pause there. Hovercraft starting to march forward with some of these lightning tanks, rather. Not, well, they're kind of light. They're the light tank of the T2 era, but that's sort of a deceptive name because they're still much better than any of the T1 tanks, so... they're only light because of the weight class that they're in, but it's like the super light heavyweight. Anyways, T2 tanks will eventually be paralyzed here by a gargantuan number of shurikens. That's what it takes. Those amphibious units are fairly resistant to paralyzation. I'm not sure exactly why, what the idea behind that is, but it's just the way that it works, I suppose. Starlight's out here for Suschees, rather, not Susqueeze. But there is a pulsar firing out into the darkness, which is really good to see. Those are a menacing defense. They're difficult to find the will to push into until you have a tick swarm or something like that. Otherwise, you're just wasting a lot of energy. I called out that I hear a Titan. I think actually what it was the oh no, it was actually the Titan. It was the footsteps over here. I'm not sure how I was able to hear those, but I do remember hearing the footsteps marching towards the front line, oh so menacingly. Luckily that pulsar, as well as those pit bulls, is a pretty good defense against the Titan. It actually ends up working out pretty good. I was trying desperately to get some more metal in my bank. Probably could have done with reclaiming a whole lot of these units, but I decided to resurrect them in case they would be useful in the backline. I still wasn't sure how much they were going to try and commit to finding this area or keeping it alive again. So I think I was sort of panicking to resurrect all these units. It probably would have just been better to reclaim. But anyway, that's now a standing army that I have in my control and moving those into position here. Using the missile trucks left over from the T1 era as sort of a crude anti-air defense. They are not great against anything except for scouts, but luckily that's kind of exactly what I'm trying to prevent, is any sort of scouting plane getting into the back line. Like, for instance, a whole bunch of blinks, which are headed forward. Now, there are anti-air defenses here, which is great, but yeah, anywhere the anti-air is not, the trucks are more than enough to shoot down a couple of blinks, as well as some finches. Anything that is needed for that sort of scouting purpose. Resbot gets a kill. Resbot does manage to eat up a entire constructor. It's a massive breakfast for a little bot like that, but certainly worth it. Does a great job. Now you can see the tick spam coming into play here as the Titan begins to also fire away at some counter tick spam leaking out from Babies. I believe Babies took this base over for another player that disconnected from the match. Can't remember who that was exactly, but they had some connection issues and did drop out of the game. Missile ships now continuing to harass over here. A beautiful little coordination over here, telling the teammate to target this down, the missile ships, to target down the anti-nuke, so that a nuclear missile could be launched. Did they? Yeah, there's one charged up, or well, charging up in the back lines here for Fat Panda, and you can see that we are lavishly underprotected from nuclear assault. Probably would have been a good idea to go for a proper anti-nuke truck, some of those mobile anti-nukes from the T2 Cortex vehicle bay before I ate it up. But I figured it was probably about time to get rid of that anyway, and so ate it up before considering it. And I think I will come to regret that decision eventually. Commander is spotted here and pinged with fury. pinged to death here. Commander is spotted. There's 3 commanders left for our team, so it's not necessarily critical that this goes down, but it is unfortunate that the commander is just staying there. I'd love to see it moved, sacrificed for its metal, or just cloaked somewhere else so that it's not destroyed. You can see the ships now firing up and onto the shoreline. Going to be shooting away at the geothermal plant, which does explode next to the commander, bringing it down to 78. Eventually, Flat E, gonna move next to the energy converters there, taking some more damage. Gotta get out of there, mate. It's raining bombs on you. At this point, a nuclear missile was launched, and you can see it was headed directly over here. I thought they were going to target the commander there for a second, but no, they actually end up just clearing a whole bunch of the defenses. I got spooked immediately. I thought the whole purpose of clearing that area was to send a bunch of marauders from the sea up in this direction, so I called out that there would be a marauder rush over there. I was sorely mistaken. That was not the idea at all. You can see that my mind was in a rush here, trying desperately to figure out what was going on. I also started up an anti-nuke immediately. As soon as that nuke was launched, my anti-nuke was finished. Those things are terrifying to go up against. And now we have the capital ships, the Epochs, laying siege over here to a couple of pulsars. Yeah, it is Epoch. As well as a big bombing run, trying to also push through on top of Flat E's base. Oh, taking a little change in direction, actually. They forgot about the anti-air that was over here. Maybe they didn't. There is anti-air trucks, though. Oh, and they shoot down all of those fighters, as well as the bombers. Very nicely done. Oh, the bombers still manage to drop some of their payload. Oh, and they get the advanced fusion reactor. Sends up that entire base. That really hurts. Meanwhile, the amphib tanks roll out of the water here, popping up their little amphibious turrets and firing away. Taking down the Tachyon, taking down the anti-air truck. That was huge damage. Those bombers got tons and tons of damage out. Shuriken are now out to try and paralyze this, but again, those amphibious units are very, very difficult to shut down. You can see they take quite a lot of those paralyzation beams before they are eventually shut down. Lightning tanks will eventually clean all this up, but it's gonna... Oh, that hurts. Friendly fire there from some of the ambassadors, but eventually all this will be cleaned up, but it takes a lot to shut down those amphibious tanks. They're very, very powerful. Not as powerful as I think I'd like them to be, but certainly pretty powerful. T3 lab coming up from Murmur. I'd love to see some marauders running by on the eastern lane. Western lane, rather. It'd be a shame to see marauders run by on the eastern lane. What was going on in my mind was basically I need to eco as hard as humanly possible right now so that eventually I can produce enough units to catch up here. Meanwhile, whoops, didn't mean to click on that. Meanwhile, the economies have continued to grow in the backline here, up to 3 advanced fusion reactors for Fat Panda, as well as a full-on fusion reactor, cloaked fusion reactor, and starting up an advanced fusion reactor for Sus Cheese. Whippy also has a fusion reactor out and starting up an advanced fusion reactor, so you can see the economies are scaling quite rapidly. We have nearly 100 metal per second down from the effects of the red team, who are almost at 500, where we're around 400, give or take, based on reclaim values. And yeah, this capital ship is just continuing to besiege this area. Shields are built here. Well, shield is built here with the second following it. But it is going to take a while. Those shields are a heavy investment at 3,000 metal apiece, 54,000 energy. They're very pricey to get up and running. Finally, a second shield does come up. I guess there was two different shields coming up at the same time there. But anyway, a second shield comes up, and that's going to be enough to deflect these plasma shots, I do believe. But certainly very expensive. Bunch of tumbleweeds rolling forward here. These were set to self-fire, not manually fire, so they will just detonate themselves whenever they feel comfortable, and a lot of them are just going to end up rolling to their deaths here. So the torpedo launchers start to fire. Yeah, go after those torpedo launchers, and then you have free access to the sea. Nicely done. Keep going. Keep on going. Yeah, I'd love to see these tumbleweeds moved across on this direction and also set off of that auto fire mode instead of the manual fire. You can get way more value out. Yeah, no anti-nuke was over here, which is tricky. Flat E does take my advice, and I am grateful for it, because getting a anti-nuke up over there is going to be really critical to making sure this area doesn't just get double nuked. Meanwhile, another nuke is charged, and we already have the location for it. We're going to take out all these metal extractors over here. Now, no advanced metal extractors, so not a crazy investment over there. But certainly, you don't want to lose any metal extractors, right? So the nuke is more or less free. I mean, it does cost a lot of metal and energy to produce, but it's you're going to produce it anyway since you already have the lab up. So why not? In the backline here, I was working on getting up to an advanced fusion reactor. No units out of me, at least not for a good long while. See, I'm starting to eat up some of these fusion reactors to pay for the advanced fusion reactor. Cutting into my metal reserves pretty heavily here. But once you get it about halfway, you can just eat up one of your fusion reactors and you're usually pretty good to go. Oh yeah, started queuing up some T2 walls as well to try and make a little bit of a buffer here in case they wanted to run by some of those hovercraft or anything like that. Start some shenanigans. This is a huge amount of defense. Beamer turrets, pit bulls, tachyon accelerators, the pulsars, all of it working to stop a flow of ticks. When you see this, when your defenses are working this hard, you can spend much less metal just putting up a Juno in the backline and using that Juno to shut down a big tick swarm like this. It's so much more cost effective. I think I even did that at some point. Yep, okay, there it is. I was thinking the same thing apparently at this point. Goes to show you that I play these games the same way I commentate them, right? At very least try. I'm not giving you hollow advice, right? I'm trying my very best to, you know, give you the best advice that I can. Now the advanced energy, or the advanced fusion reactor comes online, starts flowing in a ton of energy as well as overflowing some of it to the teammates here. Always good to see. Looks like Region Bar was the player that this belonged to, as it has now been given back. All but this advanced energy, or advanced metal extractor rather. Anti-nuke coming up, feels a bit late for that, but yeah, I mean, the base was fine. That anti-nuke just protects a little bit more forward on the front, so I can't hate on that. I think that's probably a good idea. Spy tanks are out here now, so they can give a little bit of vision to show where the enemy's artillery is. Very powerful stuff. It's the precise way of doing it is sending out a spycraft versus the imprecise way of doing it, which is you make 400 ticks and you just hope that eventually some of them make it. You can see the way I have these queued. I'm basically just putting them in the back line here. Well, sort of. I'm putting them, 2 of them on the front and then 1 in the back. Just hoping to take out whatever I can back here. Set them on repeat, set them to attack, and eventually you're going to have Juno missiles coming down in the middle of the map. Now, eventually things are starting to fall over here. 1 shield battery, not enough to deflect the plasma fire from one of these Epoch ships, apparently. And so slowly things are starting to crumble here. Pitbulls are not a great counter. We really need LLTs to shut down the ticks if we want to just kill them. But otherwise, the Pounders are just going to take tons of damage. They can't really turn and fire and shoot all at the same time, and they're not the best solution to that issue, I would say. I was hyper focused. Wasn't even looking at the front line. Nothing to do with the front line on my mind. I was just focused on getting entirely economy up and running here. Say, even had these grave robbers eating up a bunch of my windmills. Wasn't interested in having those around anymore. It's easy to forget about that, but yeah, there's 5,000 metal worth of windmills, and it's not doing anything for me. Well, I mean, it's making energy for me, which is great, but I'd rather have it in advanced fusion reactors than in a whole bunch of windmills. So, always a decent idea to send your grave robbers to go back and eat up a whole bunch of your extra eco, especially when you don't need it anymore. The Great Wall is also coming up. About 7 seconds on each one of those. I don't know how I got these pulsars here on the front, these tachyon accelerators, mobile tachyon weapons. Starlights, that's the name. I always get real descriptive when I forget the name of things. I'm not sure how I got those, but I sure did. Oh, weird. I'm not sure why we are eating up this T3 lab here. Moving it back this direction, I suppose. Interesting. Very interesting. I was trying to negotiate for a T3 Armada constructor. Always tricky. Especially if your backline doesn't have one. Getting one from a frontliner is difficult sometimes. The economy is growing, and you can see the advanced energy converters coming online slowly but surely. More of these windmills get torn down here, throwing that metal back into the economy. Very good to see. One row by row. Economies are slowly catching up to each other here. You can see that they're at about more or less about 750. We're more like 650. So it's about 100 metal split, give or take, whatever you can reclaim. And so here and there we're shooting up to about the same economy. However, it's not sustained for us. We don't have the same growth. See, up to 5 energy converter or 5 fusion reactors rather back here. As well as tons of energy banks. What on earth do we need this much energy for? Ah, this is what we need that much energy for. Ragnarok is up and coming here. 752,000 energy is required for this bad boy, and yeah, we're pumping a ton into it with all of these butlers here. Currently, a whopping 3,000 energy per second is going into building this thing, as well as a phenomenal 277 metal per second. And it's coming up pretty quick here. Just under a minute, that thing will be done. You can see I've got a special surprise headed over here. Now, I was not looking to find a Ragnarok when I was sending this commando over. I just thought I'd get a little bit of damage in by taking out the advanced fusion reactor, or the advanced geothermal plant, rather. It ended up being quite the surprise. Yeah. Front line is collapsing. We don't really have the units to supply a constant stream. However, these Vanguard are very powerful. They can shut down even those T2 units real quick. The commando is spotted. You can see I start building a whole bunch of these landmines. Nicely done by them. They did bring Shuriken over here. Just barely got it. There we go. I did remember that just barely worked. It was a single landmine. It was five landmines, I believe, was what all it took to finish that off. But eventually it was able to get it. Now the Ragnarok is up and it starts besieging everyone's base. You can see the projectiles being flung all over the map here. Now luckily for Genjuro, the deflector shields were already up and running because the capital ships had been firing on them for quite a while. But now with a Ragnarok firing, it's gonna necessitate even more, like a ridiculous amount of shields, which we do have queued up here. But do we have the resources for them? Not really. It's always disheartening to see a Ragnarok. Feels like a very, very difficult situation to win. Some of the shots from the ships are starting to leak through. The shields are becoming depleted. That is 3 capital ships continuously bombarding. It takes about 2 per ship. So right now we have just shy of the number needed. But a massive chain reaction will weaken this base to criticality. That will basically be all there is. Now this is quite nice, using the missile ships here to attack. Well, we don't need that attacked. We definitely need to see the Ragnarok attacked here. That might be why we saved up so much energy, was so that we could fire this thing in massive bursts. I suppose that's not a terrible idea. But the fronts are already falling. You can see I decided to start pumping out units at this point, made a T1 bot lab. Meanwhile, Babies has gone all the way up to T2 air as well. Our blue player does tap out at this point. I don't know if anybody took. I don't think I noticed that the blue player tapped out. It's difficult to make that call in the game. Pawns, though, do continue streaming forward, take out the energy converters, and that is going to be... Oh, this player also tapped out already. Region Bar. Region Bar also tapped out already. And before you know it, our entire front line has crumbled. The red team making a comeback for the victory here. We definitely snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. We had everything we needed on the front line, and we just failed to hold on to it. That play in the back really ravaged us. The aggression really shut us down. Oh, single Marauder. I don't know what on earth that was, but it was extremely explosive. Yeah, nobody took the blue player, unfortunately. Didn't occur to me. Advanced geothermal does go up. Luckily, there wasn't too much built by it. Sometimes you see bases that are built around the advanced geothermal plant, and yeah, that can cause problems for sure. Gunships are pretty good against these pawns. They're a nice little anti-swarm unit. The Wasp is the gunship, T2 Cortex gunship. It fires a missile that has a little bit of anti-air, or a little bit of AOE, I mean, on it. So it's very good against swarms of units, like a bunch of pawns running forward or ticks or anything like that. It does not seek very well though, so you have to make sure that you're aiming it properly. The grunt spam meets the pawn spam. Somewhere in between lie the hearts have been, or so I've been told. Starting up T2 air to try and get a bombing run together. Always a tricky prospect. See the Ragnarok firing out into the distance. This thing has tremendous range. Whoa! Does go down though to a whole bunch of these missile ships, cruise missile ships that were just bombarding it. Nicely done there. Removing a ton of the aggression from our front and allowing for a slight reprieve. Unfortunate that our blue player tapped out so early. I really would have loved to see him stick in the game just a bit longer. Even though we are on the back foot, I mean, we've already watched one comeback. Wouldn't it be interesting to watch another? I bet you're wondering how this game that started with 3 different types of cheese ended up turning into a late game. Yeah, it just goes to show that there are still matches out there on Supreme Straits that are beyond all reason indeed. The Air Forces were pushed forward here, which is interesting. Not sure why all those fighters were thrown. I didn't exactly understand why either in the moment, but it was comforting to know that they had basically no aerial defenses. I believe it even prompted me to make an airstrike of some sort. These bombers were originally meant to destroy this Ragnarok, but now that it was removed from the picture, there wasn't really much to destroy, so it just ended up being a whole bunch of bombers that I could use as I saw fit. Didn't quite have a target for them, though, at least not at the moment. What was I able to see? What was our team able to see, I should say? Not a whole lot. We really had no scouting of their backline. Basically just a minor scout of their front line. You can see I sent a whole bunch of these ducks forward. That was one thing that I had started up, was using a Twitcher to make ducks, which is one of the units that they can make. The Twitcher is by far one of the most useful units in the entire game. A bunch of these T1 bombers coming through. What on earth were they dropping bombs on? They picked the weirdest target there, and could have definitely dropped a ton of bombs on Lamberto's base, but for some reason or another they decided to bomb the middle of the map there. There must have just been a lack of vision. Meanwhile, my bombers were able to take out one of the main production facilities here for the yellow player, one of the big energy sources, shutting down one of the big resource depots for Kelsa. Now, Kelsa not out of the game, still has build power in the back here, as well as some a fusion reactor and anti-nuke and all that sort of good stuff, as well as some res bots, so could get into this game. Could get back into this game. Also as a commander, of course, which you can build a lab with. Very, very good stuff. Shuriken are now out, and they do a ton of damage. Units are leaking through, and this is never a good sign. When you start to see units leaking through your defenses, never what you want to see. These capital ships are such a pain. Very, very difficult to deal with. What I'm thinking I should have done is built 2 nuclear launchers and set them to just periodically nuke the straits right here, just to carve a big path. That way the ships can move in. Murma might have been able to do a little bit of damage over here with the missile ships too. In fact, it looks like that's what he's planning to do, or they are planning to do. Not sure who Murma identifies as, but either way, yeah, moving some missile ships over here is going to be a great plan. Yeah, I like that quite a bit, actually. Okay, the target is selected and it's over here, which is odd, but better than nothing, I suppose. My bombers were headed in. I don't know what they were targeting, but they sure were. Maybe I could have been able to bomb these energy converters here, but I had no scouting on that, and I had no idea what I was aiming at. I'm a little worried that these missile ships are just going to get jumped on here. So much range on these bad boys, but you really need them in a good position in order to use that range appropriately. I had a bunch of these ducks spared, so I decided to send them forward as sort of a counter push to these pawns. I had no idea ducks were this bad against pawns. They're abysmal. Really, really bad. Yeah, they just don't do nearly as much as I thought they did. I was thinking they would be more like sumos, when in reality they're a lot more like, I don't know, a glorified grunt, I guess. Not very good at all. This is nice. Just a sort of a sustained bombardment right here. Constantly peppering this area with a bunch of these missiles is going to weaken up a whole lot of these units, if not outright kill a whole lot of them. It is nice. It does waste a lot of their resources. Maybe a little bit further out, though. That way the missile impact zone is more on the land rather than on the sea. Not a huge problem either way, though. I was trying to send more and more of these hit squads of ducks, eventually freeing up this area, but I don't think that was ever going to work. There was just too much defense routed up. Ooh, beautiful. Oh, never mind. I thought that nuke was going to collide right here and it was going to take out this whole area. No, instead went for this spot over here. There was a ton of windmills built on this island by Ponder Grief. I was wondering, is it Ponder Grief? I just remember it might be Ponder. Or I just realized it might be Ponder. Anyway, Ponder Grief had a bunch of windmills over here, and I guess I thought that was something else. I was thinking it might have been a facility of some sort. In my deepest, darkest nightmares, I guess I thought it might have been a Ragnarok building over on that side. I was like, oh no. This is the end. They got another one. Bunch of bulls trying to push through with the T1 spam. Well, on the other side of the T1 spam, I guess. Gunships are pretty good, though. Pretty good against bulls, that's for sure. Eventually, the bulls will be cleaned up here before making it really into anywhere critical. But it opened up a pathway for a bunch of these pawns to rush in. And now they're infiltrating the base. That's not a good sign. They're working on energy converters. They're trying their very best. It's a funny little mini game, trying to kill the energy converters while the pawns are firing back. Oh, there goes all the build power. Yeah, that was inevitable. All the build power goes down for Lamberto, shutting down production and slowing down production. Now the pawns are free to roam in. A lot of their little missiles are being pushed back by the energy shields here, but they're getting pretty close to that back line, and that's pretty dangerous to see, pretty scary to see, I should say. What was I leaking? I was basically using all my energy and probably should have been producing a whole lot more. Scaling up the economy a little bit more aggressively here. Razorbacks are now leaking out, and they're difficult to deal with. The Wasps can't really deal with them because they can't, of course, shoot upwards. The Wasps, I guess they can deal with them as long as there's another unit distracting them from firing, but right now there certainly isn't. Commander goes down, takes down one of the Razorbacks with it, but there's still one moving into the base here. Razorbacks fire a laser, of course, so not going to be stopped by the pathetic repulsor shields here. And yeah, it will get tons of damage in here. Now, the gunships are working on it, working it down. A pawn was actually the one to take out the energy converters, weakening the advanced fusion reactor and eventually detonating the entire base here for Lamberto. One by one, our forces are falling. Everyone I ever knew now falling faster and faster. Nicely done bringing some anti-airships out here. Softens up that anti-air wall quite a bit. Any ships that are on that path are just going to melt away here, and you can see that that's quite a lot of them. It's basically keeping the entire southern side of the map clean because there's no ships being routed along that path and making it all the way down south again. So it's actually a really, really important matter. Now, it would be nice if this capital ship was able to do some damage, but I think by this point it was a little bit too late. No scouting was available here either for the production facilities of Pondergrief, despite being the major producer of pawns that are flooding into the backline here. I was using the bombers to try and clear away some of the harassment over here. Getting the capital ship was more than enough to justify it. Those capital ships are very, very difficult to deal with. He says stop firing these. I'm not sure exactly what these were firing on. I was trying to bomb this tank to oblivion. Doing a decent job. T2 bombers are pretty powerful. You can see that this guy does go down. That is a tough debris. Very, very strong. Fighters are now streaming in though, making it difficult for my bombers to work. Titans have hit the front line. Red alert! Red alert! The Titans have hit the lines. Made a little duck wall. Quack quack. I was unaware of how pitifully bad the ducks are on land. I felt like they were really good because they fired that green heavy laser. I have since come to see the light. I actually don't think they're that great. They're decent, but they're not great. And one of the problems that they have is just the fact that they fire so slowly. And the gunships are quite nice. Oh, but this is what has ravaged the Navy over here. These platypus have pushed forward, and yeah, submarines are not going to do it. Murma's Navy now collapses. A bunch of these platypus push forward. The torpedo launchers are helpless against all of these floaty boys. just continuing to march on through. We do, in fact, decide to resign after a hugely back-and-forth game, all the way onto their backline's doorstep before being repulsed from a huge play in the backline by Ponder Grief, and eventually being pushed all the way back into our backline. What an amazing back and forth. I really, really enjoyed this game. There's a reason why so many of you called out for me to cast it, and you are absolutely right to do so. What a beautiful match. Just showcasing exactly how variable these strategies are and how incredibly diverse the game can be. Oh, I'm really happy with myself. Managing to tech up this high to even compete with Sus Cheese up here. I mean, I wasn't even really that close to Fat Panda, and I was barely close to Sus Cheese, but certainly doing a decent job of teching up at a rate that was able to keep me in the game here. Very happy with that. Very happy with my performance. These are as much a review of my own games as they are a commentation for you guys to enjoy. I'm always trying to learn the game just as well as you might be. So, you know, always improving. That's the motto around here. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out.